Okay, y'all. We're gonna start lecture now. Sorry for starting a bit late, but today we're gonna be talking about collection views. So we're gonna be going over the demo for collection views. If you can, please go to the lecture demo page to download the actual demo. Just to preface, collection views are one of the harder concepts within iOS development. So the demo is also probably going to be a little difficult to understand the first time running through it, but we'll try our best. And also, you might notice that Justin isn't here today. He's at a ping pong tournament right now. So yeah, we don't only do iOS 11, we're people outside of this. But yeah, we're gonna get started in a bit. Well, actually no, we should probably get started like now. So I'll download this here, starter code. Oh, oops. I was working on it before, so I'm delete it. So. Okay. But once you download it, it should look something like this. Let me open it. Trust. Don't worry about whatever that is, but it should look like this. And if you guys run it, it should show like a little thing, like in a sec. Give it 1 sec. While I give it a bit of time to load, let's just go over these files. So these look like a lot of files, but they're stuff that should be somewhat familiar given that collection views are a little bit similar to table views. But let's start off with like app delegate. Nothing's changed here at all. Usually nothing changes here. So we're good here. In scene delegate, it's the same thing. We have like a window and we make it a UI navigation controller. Although in this case, we don't really need one since we're not really going to be pushing or popping anything. But yeah, this should all be, this is all standard. You don't have to touch this. And then in our view controller is where we start to actually do stuff. So right now we have 2 buttons on the screen. We have a round shape and a pointy shapes. So to kind of give more context into what that actually is, this is what we're going to be eventually building, a collection view of shapes where we're going to have circles, triangles, squares, and umbrellas. No, wait, we're going to have circles, triangles, stars, and umbrellas. And they're just going to be different shapes that we have. And we're going to try to filter through them using these 2 buttons. And so this is what one of the cells is going to look like. It's just going to be a circle. And all of these circle images are images within our assets folder. So we have like a circle, a star, a triangle, and an umbrella. And yeah, so let's just go into view controller a bit. So we have like 2 buttons, like I said. We have the different circles, which are shape objects. So our first circle is, we have like a circle, triangle, umbrella, and a star. And we have an array of shapes here at the bottom. Along with that, we set the title of our view to be shapes, like it says here. We set the background color to be white. And we create this array of shapes. So it looks like a lot, but it's basically just like 4 circles, 4 triangles, 4 umbrellas, and 4 stars. So in total, we have like 16 things. Okay. Yeah. So our array is like kind of big. And we also have a round shape button. So this is where we actually set up like the button stuff. So we give it the title round shapes and we give it a background color. We set the title color to be white and translate all that layer, give it a radius. Another thing that we're going to be doing this time is actually giving the buttons a tag. So by giving it a tag, it's going to be easier for us to determine which button was tapped when, oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, I always forget to do that, my fault. Okay, I'll do it like that. Actually, I'm just gonna this. Okay. But okay. Yeah. So okay. We have the button, we have a tag now associated with each button. And we also have this function filter shapes. So filter shapes is going to be the function that we actually use in order to filter our shapes. And as something new here is that we're actually taking in the button itself. So our filter shapes is going to be able to determine like what button is which button. So you don't have to type this right now, but we're going to be doing something like set like sender.tag, and that tag is either going to be 0 or 1. So that's why we're passing in the button itself. And we're adding to the subview. We're setting up the constraints for the buttons. So we have like round shapes buttons and pointy shapes buttons. And eventually here, we're going to uncomment all of this to put the constraints on the collection view. So that's a little bit of the view controller. To go into what a shape exactly is, a shape is just a class object that contains an image name, and we set up that image name here. So it's nothing huge. So the image name we use to actually only pull up the image of like the shape. So each image name is like star, triangle, umbrella, whatnot. And that's what we're doing here. We're using the image name up here in view controller. Okay, so that's the view controller. It's the shapes. So going into our shapes view controller, here is where we set up the actual individual cell. So in the last demo, we physically created the collection view cell file by going to file, new, file, and Cocoa Touch class, and then like calling this like shapes collection view. And we made it a sub. This time we're making it a subclass of the UI collection view cell instead of like the UI table view cell. So that's basically the process of making this file. We called it shapes collection view cell, and I made it. Or actually no, yeah, I did make this. And it's just set up here. So what we have here right now is just the image view for the actual shape itself. And here in these first two lines, we set the border of the content view itself to have a radius. So this is like the border of the cell itself, not the actual image. So we're not actually giving the image itself like a corner radius. We're giving the content view a corner radius. And the content view is just a cell. That's how we refer to the cell. And here we're setting the shapes image view to be, or actually, the shapes image view, we're not setting it equal to anything right now. We're just saying that it's going to scale to fit to the entire cell. And the translate auto resize mask constraint stuff. And we're adding this shapes image view to our content view subview. And then we're setting up the constraints. I guess that was a lot for now. I'm gonna keep going into shape collection view cells in a bit, but does anybody have any questions with like the view controller, the shape file, any of that? Okay, cool. But yeah, we set up the constraints here for the shape image view. We set it to fill up basically the content view. And we have this function configure, which similar to our last demo, we're basically going to be taking in a shape object. And we're going to say that that shape image views image is going to be equal to a new UI image with that shape image name. So if I pass in here like a shape whose image name is circle, then I'm gonna get that circle text here, and I'm going to make a new image using that text and put it into my image view. So I don't actually I don't set up the image in my override init. Like I don't set up what that image is. Instead, I let this configure function tell me what that image is when I'm trying to like create a cell. So we're going to be calling this function later when we're creating like each cell individually in our view controller. And then we have our required init. So nothing too crazy, you know. This is all like configure, setting up constraints, all that. And yeah. So yeah. before I go into the demo, any questions on the setup? Okay, so let's get into it. So basically, the first thing we have to do is create a collection view. So I'm going to instantiate a collection view. I'm gonna call this our collection view is a collection view. And the way I'm setting it up so weird right now, instead of like setting it equal to anything, is because collection views have to be given um a frame and also a layout style, and we don't have either of those yet. So we're actually going to be doing that first. We're going to be setting up the flow layout for this collection view. So let's do that. Let's call our shape layout is equal to UI. Or hold up. So it's this, and then we want to do a shape layout. So we want to set the minimum line spacing to be some number. And that number we're actually going to declare up here. So typically when we're trying to create apps and we're trying to create like minimum line spacing or like minimum interline spacing, we want to set that constant equal to something that we know. Basically we don't want to put in just like a number there. We want to make sure that number like has an actual definition and we know what that number is. So that's what I'm gonna be doing up here. I'm gonna say CG, what CG, or actually spacing. And then here, I'm going to be setting the shape layouts minimum line spacing to be that spacing. Okay. And along with that, we're gonna be doing that minimum interline spacing. We also want to make sure that we set the scroll direction with our shape layout. So let's do that. Shape layout, that scroll direction is equal to vertical. And that's basically all we really need for our shape layout. After this, we can finally create our collection view. So let's instantiate this collection view. So I'm gonna be like collection view dot is equal to. We're gonna choose this second option, UI collection view frame with a collection view layout. And the frame in this case is gonna be dot 0 because the frame basically tells us how like big or how wide do we want this like collection view to be. And we don't want to tell it that right now. We're gonna set that up when we set up our constraints. And we're gonna say the collection view layout is this shape layout that we just made. Okay. So this is how we're gonna be instantiating the collection view. That's why collection views are a little wonky because we have to do this, setting up the frame and collection view layout. But besides that, everything else is fairly similar to table views. And so now what we want to do is we want to say collection. So we want to give the collection view like something to define what its cells are. So let's register. It's a collection view dot register, and then our cell class is going to be shapes collection view cell class, or shapes collection view dot cell with reuse identifier. Okay, this is the part where we have to create a reuse identifier, but I'll do that in a second. It's a lot of typing right now. I'm gonna make my reuse identifier somewhere up here. So I'm gonna be like, let shape reuse. And this string in here could really be anything you want. Like it really doesn't have to be this formula. It could be like literally like a number or like shape, but it's just standard to call it like what the name is referring to. So I just copied it. And so we're just gonna pass this in as a reuse identifier. And that should be just about everything that we need to actually register this collection view. So I'm gonna add this collection view to the sub view. I'm just gonna okay. I'm gonna run it now just to see if I get any errors. I shouldn't see anything that changes on the screen because I actually didn't add any constraints yet. But I just want to make sure like I'm not missing anything. Okay. So it looks like the collection view's there and it's looking good. Did everybody catch everything I wrote? Okay, cool. So all right. As you'll see, I made this like huge comment block, which I really don't like to do usually during demos because it's annoying to uncomment all of that. But there's a shortcut to uncomment it. So I do command and the slash next to the shift on your right. So if you see like it's like the same button that has a question mark and a slash. So I just press command and that, and it uncomments all of that, so you don't have to go through line by line removing the comments. But basically, this is just setting up the constraints for the collection view. We're saying that the collection view's top anchor is going to be equal to the oh yeah, we're saying that it's equal to the round button's bottom anchor because we want it to be below the buttons. We don't want to be like over it. And we're giving it this collection view padding because we want to make sure that the padding that we give it is defined here and we can actually see what it is. It's not just some arbitrary number. And we use this padding throughout to give it some padding between like the walls and like the bottom of the view. So when I run this now, oh wait, I will probably also see nothing. Oh, what? Let me like, okay, I'll ignore that for now. But to actually show that the collection view is there, I'm just gonna be like collection view dot background color is equal to dot what? I mean dot system blue. I'm gonna rerun it. Okay, so it looks like I'm definitely missing something here. Okay, so I guess it's not a BR. I'll change it to let. But besides that, oh yeah, I always forget this. We have to call collection view dot translate auto settings. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it looks a lot nicer now. So basically all I added was this line from what we typed, collection view dot translate auto setting has traits. Always check to see whether that line's there if you don't see your view appearing. It's always probably something like that. But yeah, cool. Now we have our collection view. We registered to the cell. And okay, cool. So how do we actually get the data for this collection view? So similar to the table views, we're just going to be saying something like collection view dot data source is equal to self. That way we know, or that way the table view knows that we're going to be the ones that implement how the data is presented, or we're going to be the ones to implement the data into the collection view in this entire view controller. And we're going to do that by not clicking on this and fixing it because we got to create an extension. So I'm gonna go down a bit. Here at the bottom, I'm going to create an extension controller that is going to conform to UI collection view data source. This one. Oops. And here I'm going to tell the collection view how to actually get this data. So as you can see, it's giving me some errors saying like, do you want to add a protocol sub? I'll just give it a second. But once you guys see this error, which you probably should, just click fix and you will get that first function that we need. And so this first function is just asking us like to set up the cell at each row. So let's do that. Let's set up the cell. We're going to say let cell equal to UI collection view. Oh wait, collection view dot DQ reusable cell. So we're gonna DQ a cell if it's not being used with reuse identifier shape, reuse identifier for index path. So we're getting some cell, but now we have to make sure that it's of type UI collection view cell, because that's the collection view cell that we're working with. Or I mean, we have to make sure it's of type shape collection view cell. So and we're gonna force unwrap it because we know that anytime, actually wait, actually no, I totally lied. It should be something like this. So we're gonna say if let cell is equal to DQing some cell, and I'm going to cast it as a shapes collection view cell. If I can do this, then let me configure this cell. I'm gonna do cell.configure. And the shape is going to be, we have an array shapes up in the code. I'm not gonna scroll up right now, but we do have an array shapes. And the way we're gonna get the index of the shape that we want to use to load into some cell is by calling index path.row. So this is how we're actually going to load the cell. Oh yeah, and okay. If we can't DQ some cell for some reason, maybe it doesn't exist, then we're just going to return a UI collection cell. So I'm configuring the cell every time. For every cell in my collection view, I'm configuring the cell, and if it's not there, I'll just return like this UI collection view cell. All right. And it's yelling at me again because I'm missing another function. So, all right, I'll just leave it here for now. Everybody good? Okay, cool. So there's this other error that we're seeing. It's saying we need to add more protocol subs. So let's just do that. Okay, and here we have to tell it how many items are in a section. So for our purposes, we're going to be saying we only have one section. So let's just assume that all of our items are in every section. And so how many items are in a section if there's only one section? Well, that's just going to be however many shapes we have, right? That's going to be the total number of shapes. Oh, I think I'm missing this here. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. In my cell for item at function, I forgot to return the cell, which we did have to do because it's asking for some cell to be returned. But once we have all that code running and we press the run button, we'll see that our shapes are finally here. They appear and they look kind of weird, not gonna lie. So we don't want it to look this way. We want to make it so that there are two cells per row. And we want to make it so it looks like there's two columns of like cells. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to make another extension. I go here at the bottom, like extension view controllers of type UI collection view flow layouts. Oh wait, no, I'm missing something. It's collection. Okay, it's this one. It's UI collection view delegate flow layout. Because we're going to try to delegate how big our cells are from this view controller. So let's do that. And this isn't going to tell us the functions that we're missing because we don't need this function in order to present any cells. So I'm going to have to look up the name real quick. Okay, so we're going to be building in a function size for item at. So if you just type in like func and then size for item at, you'll see this like blue stuff up here. Just press enter, and it'll just autocomplete all of that for you. So basically what this function is doing is it's going to take in some layout, and it's going to set the size based off that layout um, of each cell. So we're going to set like the width and height of the cell. And so in order to do that, we're going to create some size. And as you can see, it's like returning some CG size. So we have to create some like width and height variable. So we're just going to call it size in this case. And our size is just going to be basically the collection view that width. Okay. So basically what this is saying is I want the width and height size because every cell is going to be a square. I'm basically just I'm going to be setting size equal to the width and height of the cell. And what we're saying size is basically just 1/2 of the screen minus padding of 10. That way the cells aren't like touching. But basically this is going to say that like the width of the cell is going to be equal to like half of the width of whatever my collection view is. And the reason we're using collection view in this case instead of our view dot with anchor and stuff is because the collection view is a bit smaller, right? So it's like I think 20 pixels smaller than the actual width of the view itself. So that's why we're referring to the collection views width instead of the views width, but it should be fine since the collection view will also scale if we change our phones. So we're just going to set that to the size, and all we're going to do is return CG size with some width and height. In this case, the width is just going to be size, and height will also just be size. And then with this function, I should be good. Oh, okay, never mind. Okay, maybe I'm not good. Let's see. No. Oh, for this. So okay, I'll go back to how we set up the collection view. So our collection view is set up this way. This is all we've done so far for our collection view. We've given it some layout. That way it could follow like some vertical or horizontal scrolling direction. We gave it a background color just so we could see where it is. We actually don't need this line. I'm not going to uncomment it now though. Just so we could see what the background actually looks like. And we're making sure to translate auto resize mask trace to be false. That way, Storyboard knows that we're not using or that way our app knows that we're not using Storyboard to lay out our collection view. We're the ones that are going to be saying how to lay out our collection view. And we're registering it to be this shapes collection view cell. And the reason we're registering it here is so that we could actually give the cells some kind of rule to configure themselves. So every cell knows it has to be of type shapes collection view cell because I'm setting it up here. I'm registering every cell here to be that type with some reuse identifier. So like if I didn't have this line, I'm pretty sure I'd get an error, either that or nothing would appear. You don't have to do this right now. So I'll just uncomment it, just see what happens. Oh, okay, yeah, it throws me some really weird error. So you definitely need this. Okay. And actually, I just realized why the cells themselves aren't changing shape. And it's because we're not calling. It's because we haven't set the delegate for the collection to be itself. So, okay, yeah, it was that reason. So now that we set it to be itself, we can finally see all of the cells that we have. So that's really neat. Okay, cool. But now, so is everybody up to this point? Is there any, are you still having issues? Okay. So yeah, just to kind of summarize what we did, we just like set up the collection view here. We gave it some reuse identifier, which we described up here. We uncommented all of our constraints here. And we configured each cell here. So we have a cell.configure. And oh, this configure function, in case it might have not been clear, is here. So basically every cell. Okay, no, not here. When we call cell.configure, we're basically just saying, for that cell, that is of type shape collection view cell, call this configure function that takes in some shape and set up that image for that shape. So every shape comes with some image name, and we're basically saying that the image view for the cell is going to be equal to some UI image that has that image shape. And after we configure, we just return it. And if there's nothing, if we can't configure it for some reason, it's nil, then we just return an empty collection view cell to make it happy. But this should never be the case. And then we're setting up the size here at the bottom. This is how we actually set up the size of each cell. This part is actually a lot different than table views because we didn't set the size of the cell itself. We set the size of like the contents of the cell or of the contents of the row in the table view. In this case, we're actually setting up the width and height of the cells. So size is just the width and height of the cell. And we're returning, and the reason we know it's a width and height is because we're setting it here. We're saying the width is equal to size and height is equal to size, right? Okay, so now comes the actual complicated part. How do we filter it? So, okay, did everybody get up to this point? Is everybody able to see some cells? Okay, cool. So we don't have that much time. So I'm gonna try to go through this a bit faster, but basically, okay, this function took me like, I want to say like 3 hours to actually implement because I changed this demo like today to implement this. So I have it here, but I'll walk you guys through like how I decided to filter it. So, okay, basically like like I said earlier, we gave each button a tag so we could actually differentiate between them. So we definitely want to differentiate between the buttons that we press. But another issue comes up with how we actually populate the cells themselves. So the way we're going to be filtering these cells is we're going to basically be like changing the shape. You don't have to type this out right now, but we're basically going to be changing the shapes array because we have an array up here. We're going to be changing shapes. So I'll actually like change the contents of shape array. And then we're going to be calling collection view.reload data. So actually we could just uncomment this right now. Because we're definitely going to be doing this. Reload data. And what collection view.reload data does is basically like it looks at the array, or at least in this case, it's going to look at the array of shapes that we have. And it's going to see whether or not it changed or not. And if it changed, like maybe the size of shapes like decreased, then we're going to reload that information into the collection view. So if I click round shapes, I should only see circles and umbrellas because those are the only two like roundish shapes. And then if I click pointy shapes, I should see pointy triangles and pointy stars. But if I click both of them at the same time, the expected behavior would be that we see all of the cells, right? And right now, when both of them are not selected, the expected behavior would be to see all of the cells, right? So we have to consider all of these cases when we're talking about filtering. So basically, the first thing that we're going to need is some array that holds all of the shapes. So because we want to change shapes, we actually want to create another array up here. So we want to say something like var all shapes, which is of type shape, is equal to shape. And we're going to say all shapes is equal to shapes initially. So actually, I don't even want this to be a var. I want it to be a let. What I'm, oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, fine. But basically what I'm saying here, or what I'm going to be doing eventually with all shapes, is I'm going to be referring to all shapes in order to filter stuff and not shapes, because I want to change whatever's in shapes. But in order to change whatever's in shapes, I have to know how many things I have total. So it'll make a little bit more sense like as I go through the demo. So I'll just I just made those things right now. So I have now an array all shapes. And how I made that array is I declared it up here. same way as shapes basically. And I set all shapes equal to shapes at first. So, okay. Now what we're gonna do, whenever we filter stuff, we want to make our shapes array equal to null or nothing. We want it totally empty. We don't want it to have anything right now. And then oh, we also want to create an array. Here, I'll go back up here. So I just added this empty shape stuff. So up here, I want to create an array. Filter selected. That is going to be of type bool. And this array is just going to be like false, false. And what I'm saying here basically is this array is going to hold like whether or not some filter was selected. In this case, I'm only talking about two filters because like I only have two buttons. So I set it to be false at first because I know that both of these buttons have not been selected. And I'll change them as I like actually select stuff. And the reason I do this is because it makes it easier to decide what to actually filter. So I'll just leave that there. Under. Okay, there we go. So going back down. Okay. So I want to, now that I have this filtered array, right? This filter selected array, it basically like tells me which button it has not been pressed or is pressed. So what I want to do is I want to get that tag. So basically every index now corresponds to a button. So the first index 0 is going to correspond to the first button that I pressed. So I set that tag to, I use that tag to get like that filter selected element, and then I toggle it. So now it was false and now it's true. So that means I pressed it. Right. But there's also a property that I want to change with the sender itself. There's this is selected that every button has. So in this case, the sender is a button, some specific button, and I'm going to change sender that is selected to be true as well. That way I know that the button itself that I press has gone from being unpressed to is selected. So I'm going to do that. And the first thing that I want to do for the buttons, at least, is I want to change the color of a button if I tap it. So if sender that is selected, then I want to do sender dot background color is equal to dot system. Let's change it to purple. All right. If it's not selected, which means that it hasn't been tapped or it's just been like unselected, then I want to change the color back to blue. Okay. I'm going to comment out shapes right now just to show you that, or I'm going to comment out like setting the shapes equal to empty just so you guys could see how these buttons change now. So now they change like that, which is pretty nice. So we could actually tell like what buttons we clicked. So I'm just going to go back here. And that's just changing the button color, right? So how do we actually do this filtering stuff now? So we have our array of filters selected, and this array is nice because it tells us like whether some button has been pressed and is still pressed. So like whenever I call this function, the function only like knows information about the button that it was clicked on, right? It can't tell like whether the button to the left of it was actually clicked or like the button that called this function before was clicked, right? So the array actually tells us like the history of like what's being filtered right now. Like if like the array is going to tell me whether or not I click both of these buttons, and like if like when I click this button, is this button still purple? Like it'll be able to tell me that, and that's important information, right? Because if I click this button and I unclick it, then I still want pointy shapes to be presented, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask like if filter selected at 0. So if the filter is selected at 0, then in shapes, I'm going to add. Okay, sorry, that was a lot. That was a lot. Let me go back. So basically, I'm just gonna right now, shapes has nothing, right? So I want to populate it with the filtered stuff, right? So if filtered selected 0 is true, then that means that that first button is pressed. It either is pressed or it has been pressed, right? Doesn't matter, but we want to add whatever stuff is being filtered on there to our shapes array, right? So I'm gonna be like shapes is equal to shapes dot or plus all shapes. All shapes is the array of all the shapes, right? And this array of all shapes we want to filter. So there's this cool filter function that's here. So I'm gonna press enter once, and I'll see that it has this stuff here, right? And I don't really want that. So I'm gonna press enter again. And now I actually have like this cool little block of code. So here in shape, I'm gonna type in shape. And this shape here is just a variable that I'm gonna use to refer to every individual shape within my array. And basically the property that I want it to hold is that shape that image name is equal to umbrella or shape that image name is equal to. Because if we remember, that first button is talking about round shapes. And the only round shapes that I have are umbrellas and circles. And so I'm saying that like I'm gonna filter it by every shape. And for every shape, the only time that I'm gonna accept like a cell to add to my shapes is if like the image name is equal to umbrella or it's a circle. Because those are the only two rounded shapes that I have in my array of shapes, right? So that's how I'm gonna do that. And then I'm gonna go on to my second button, right? So that's the first button basically taken care of. Like if that first button is pressed, then I'm going to add to my shapes array all the shapes that are an umbrella or a circle. But I'm not done there, right? Because I haven't said anything about the second button. Like if the second button is still pressed, then I want both kinds of information to still appear on the screen, right? So filter selected now is going to be the same thing basically. All shapes here with shape in, except this time name. The image name that I want to talk about is a triangle. Oops. And a star. So now I'm basically saying, okay, I already checked the first button and I already added the stuff to the first button if I needed to. Oops. Like, say like the image isn't an umbrella, right? Say it's like a triangle here in this first if statement. If it's a triangle, then I don't want it. If my first button is selected, right? I don't want it. But when I check my second button and I see whether or not it's tapped, like if it has been tapped, like if it's purple, then I definitely want the stuff in there, right? Like it makes sense. Like if I have both of these like as purple, then I want both of them, right? I want to find the intersection between the two. And so that's what I'm going to do. And so that's what that line of code does. And then our last condition is what if like neither of the buttons are tapped? Okay, what about the case where like both of them are blue right now? I click on one of them, it's purple now, right? But then I unclick it, right? When I unclick it, I want to make sure that even though right now both of my buttons are false, right? They're not tapped. So because they're blue, they're false. And so my array is going to be false for both elements, right? If these two things are false, then I still want to present all the information, right? I want to present all the information that I have. So how do I do that? I'm going to check and see filter selected if it's equal to filter selected. And the reason I'm doing this is like this line of code specifically is because if they're both selected, then I want to present all the information, right? But if they're both not selected, if they're both false, then I still want to present all the information, right? I want to present everything that I have. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say shapes equals all shapes. This is where all shapes comes in handy because I have an array now. I have two arrays. I have an array of shapes that changes depending on which button I clicked. And then I have an array of all shapes that doesn't change at all. It never changes. All shapes should always be constant because I need that all shapes array in order to actually filter by stuff. because say I filtered say I filtered using just shapes, then I wouldn't be able to undo that filtering because I don't know what elements to add to it if I'm just talking about shapes. So I'm setting shapes to be all shapes here in this case. And now finally that I'm done with all those cases, I could return. Actually, no, I don't want to return shapes. What am I saying? Um, I think that's all. Yeah. So I basically set the shapes are. Yeah, what's up?
And you look at that also and then else.
So that'd be nice. And you could do that. You could do that with these buttons, right? So you could say like if button one has been tapped, then add all the filter buttons, add all the like yeah, say like round shapes has been tapped and add the circles and like umbrellas to the thing. And you can have an if condition for every button. But thing is that gets tricky when you're trying to do this or stuff, right? So what if I have both buttons pressed, right? Do I have to have like a whole other condition? Like if both are true, then add all this stuff. That's like three conditions right there. Because I have to check if the first one's true, then I have to check if the second one's true, and then I have to check if both of them are true, or if both of them are false. And in the long run, like in your project, you're gonna have more than like two buttons. You're gonna have like at minimum, I think it was like five things. So by having like an array of filter selected, something similar to this, not exactly this, but something similar. By having some array like this that tells you like which buttons are selected, basically, then you'll be able to kind of use this approach similarly, where you're checking every index, and then at the end, it's a lot easier to check to see whether or not all of them are selected or none of them are selected. Because that's the other case. And also just combining them, right? In order to combine things, another thing you should probably think about is like, how am I supposed to like combine things, right? So another way you could have implemented these buttons if I click this rounded shapes and I unclicked it, then I could have just like I could have said that like, okay, if it's unselected, then add everything to my then add all of the items to my collection view. But what if I had like this button selected, right? And then I had this one selected, and then I unselected it. Then if I add all of my items to the view, that then this button doesn't really make sense anymore because it says it's selected, right? But I just have all of my stuff in my collection view here. So I still want to make sure that when I like unselect this button, that the stuff concerning this button is still there. Like the pointy shapes are still there. And the way I do that is by going through each one of these filtered selected elements and asking like, are you true? And if you are true, then I add whatever elements you have to my shapes array. And yeah, and so now if I run this, it should be good. So if I click round shapes, as you can see, I only get round shapes. Let me unselect it. If I unselect it, you also get like all the shapes, right? And that's because both these things are false. So actually, I could also just like print so y'all could actually see what this is. Oh, what the heck? Okay. So now if I click this, right? Now that it's clicked, it's true and false. Like true concerning the first button, false concerning the second button because it's not tapped. And then when I click both, they're both now true. Oh wait, what? Okay, yeah, they're both true. And then when I unclick it, it's now true false. And when I click this first one again, it goes back to false false, right? So in the case that it's false false, I check this thing here, right? And I'm like, okay, they're equal. So I definitely want to present all the shapes. And same thing if like they're both true. If they're both equal, then I want to present all shapes. That's exactly what I'm doing here. But yeah. So it looks like we're wrapping up lecture in a bit. I'm trying to. Okay, so basically Justin isn't here, and he's the one with Kahoot premium access, so I can't really use his Kahoot. So I'm gonna try to create a Polev. Um, but yeah, I guess before I pull up the Polev, Collection views are probably like I said, one of the harder projects for sure, because you have a lot of different things going on. You're gonna have your filtering, you're gonna have your presenting your collection views. Another reason collection views are really tricky is because sometimes like you won't see anything on the screen and you won't know why. And there could be a million reasons why they don't show up. Like it didn't show up earlier because I didn't have the translate auto resizing masking traits or whatever. But it could also not show up like if you don't set the delegate to be itself, or if you don't set up the cell class correctly, or like maybe in your cell file itself, you set up like things incorrectly, right? So there are a million ways that collection views could go wrong. And Swift sucks in the fact that they don't tell you exactly where you went wrong. So I'd say like if you have a mentor or anything, like definitely reach out to them for help if you need. Or like always feel free to reach out to Justin or I if you ever need any help. But yeah, this assignment's gonna be a little difficult. I'd say the hardest part is probably filtering. Like I went through this demo today, and like I said, I went through filtering for like 3 hours trying to figure out like how to actually get both shapes to show up, like how to get all the shapes to show up like when I press the two buttons. And it's gonna be really hard like with 5 elements, I want to say. Um they're not really hard, just like hard. Um, but yeah. Okay.